Hello, welcome to this channel. I am Joaquin, General Manager of CAPS, and today I will be speaking with Inés Marrache. Inés is a former Senior Policy Officer of the Royal College of General Practitioners in the United Kingdom, based in London, and she also has a Master's in Health Policy from London School of Economics. And the conversation is really interesting because we're gonna dig in about the particularities of doing advocacy from the perspective of a professional association. And I think that this is something new that can provide value and several insights to those of us that work in the sphere of corporate affairs. So I hope you enjoy the video. Thank you. Hello, Inés, how are you?
Oh, good. Hi, Joaquin. How are you?
Fine. Thank you very much for being here today. And I hope that we're going to share a lot of valuable insights with the audience, especially about your previous role. You're going to tell us a bit about that, and we're going to explore how professional associations can do advocacy. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your professional background, please?
Well, just to say it's a pleasure to be in the first episode. And yes, sure, I'm happy to share a bit about my professional experience. So I studied law. So my undergrad was in legal, and then I worked as a lawyer for a few years, mainly in the energy sector. And then I moved to a public policy think tank, and there I did a bit of research and public policy analysis, public affairs, a bit of campaigning, and also articulation with stakeholders. And later I moved to London a few years later to do my master's in public policy and public administration at the London School of Economics. And so when I finished, I knew I wanted to use my skills from my previous work experience and the knowledge I gained in the master's. So I started looking for policy roles, mainly in the health sector, which was the main area I was working on the think tank. And then I got the opportunity of joining the Royal College of General Practitioners in London. And I think in terms of what from my career led me to the college, I would say probably two main things. On the one hand, have improved experience in policy, definitely in public affairs, like improved experience and policy wins. That was definitely crucial. So this is a testament of my experience in the area. But also, I would say like probably having the academic foundation in the area that the master gave me. I think that was also very useful and beneficial to the post.
Yes, and well, you can only think on the impact that such a big association might have on policies, right, at the national level. How many members there were?
I missed that key point, which is the Royal College of GPs is the largest medical college in the UK and the fourth largest around the world. And they have around 54,000 members, so that's quite a lot.
Huge. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
What's the main mission of that organization?
So the college's mission is to set the medical standards for general practitioners, GPs in the short version. And that basically means like establishing how GPs should provide the best care for patients.
Okay. Right. And maybe it seems very easy to understand for people that are, near advocacy, but for those that are not that near, how did advocacy fit into that puzzle and big mission of this very large organization?
Yeah. This is a professional body, so at the end, the advocacy efforts are focused on improving the conditions in which the doctors, GPs work on, but also at the same time looking forward to improve the overall population health at the same time.
Yes. Okay. So advocacy in two streams then, for the members and for the beneficiaries.
The overall society.
Yes, of course. Okay. Very interesting, because there are very different pathways towards that. Okay, so when you compare these to other traditional stakeholders that do advocacy, like civil society organizations or even companies or consultancies, etc., what is the particularity of the advocacy work of an association such as the Royal College of GPs?
I would say that definitely the relevance of the college, of the professional body in the ecosystems is which makes a big difference, because in a way you have almost a guaranteed seat at the table compared to other organizations such as consultancies or NGOs or businesses broadly. They need to prove their legitimacy in a way, but as a professional body, you have to be in the discussion when main things are discussed. So that definitely puts you like 2-3 steps ahead of it. That's definitely an advantage. But at the same time, I would say because of that, you have to be very careful on the type of arguments and proposals you present, because the media will pick up quickly whatever you say, and you have this reputation to maintain. So I think, that comes with a great responsibility as well.
Right. And also, I'm thinking about the consensus that you need to reach in order to share some positions. Is that a very difficult process, or what's the governance like of such an institution?
That's really interesting, actually. I've worked for a professional body, but I had to have conversation with other colleges in the UK, and the governing models change slightly from one to the other. I would say, broadly speaking, you have like a board of directors, put it in business language, in this case where they were called officers, that are elected by members, and they represent like key roles, and they have like short periods of like presidency, or like the role they are fine like 2 to 3 years. And then you have like
the strategy.
Exactly. They design like priorities for the colleges, and the key KPIs that are actually driven by like a CEO kind of. And then also you have representatives from like key regions across the nation, and that vote and take decisions and go to council to approve decisions. So actually the board manages the day-to-day things, but then key policies or proposals or changes are approved by council, which is kind of a democratic way of making decisions.
It should be a very well-oiled mechanism in order to function right, because it's very large. Can you share some successful advocacy initiative that you were involved with at the time?
Definitely. Well, actually, while I was working on the college, I was leading a few different portfolios, but one of them, or the main one probably, it was health inequalities. And since the college is now working on this area, I can say that we managed to move a critical mass of stakeholders within the government and outside of the government, pushing for more like concrete action, like especially central government action in this area. But also, I think that we managed to clearly bring more public attention to the topic. So I think a couple of things that I would like to mention. Firstly, it was like something like a quick and in a way the small win, but I think it was important. We managed to publish a call to action letter just before the previous government call to election. So that was important because it said like the priority of saying like this is something the government should be looking at. And also I think it was good and important, not just because we were saying that, but because we managed to co-sign this letter alongside a leading patient organization and one of the most influential health policy think tanks.
All right.
And on top of that, I would say like the cherry of the whole thing, of the part, was that in a way this set the basis for one thing we consider an important win in this space. That was that the Labour Party, just after the election poll, and each party draft a manifesto. So in general, the Labour Party not only changed the tone of the conversation, stressing the importance of equity, but also included on their manifesto concretely a clear commitment about halving the life expectancy gap between the poorest and the richer. the richest. So I think that was definitely something we appreciated, was a clear and tangible thing that we can keep the government accountable for. So I think that that was an important win for us in that space.
Great. So very concretely here, key elements should be, and please add to the list I'm going to mention, but timely decision, taking into consideration an election period, working in coalition with other strong stakeholders, right? And involving both parties, so not being, because, well, I mean, you can have a guess, but you never know who's going to win the election, right? At the end of the day, it should not be political in that stance. So this requires a good reading of the times, a good reading of the political things that are happening, right? The spectrum, and also working in coalition. So if I have to ask about how you measure the impact on that specific goal that you achieved, which KPIs are we looking at here?
Well, interestingly, when the college drafted the new, which is the current strategic plan, there were 4 priorities for the current chair, one of them being health inequalities, and there were KPIs like linked to membership directly and linked to views on a platform we had, like, all right, really. And in terms of this particular point, we had, like, for public affairs and policy, a KPI that was getting certain number of policy commitments from the leading parties on this space. So definitely it was like a big check in the box. Yeah.
All right. Of course, you can imagine the impact that this is going to have or is having on national policy, right? So it's a very, very high scale of advocacy, and not just within this specific strategy, but other experiences that you might have within the association. When you are engaging with policymakers or other stakeholders, what are the strategies or tactics that you think work best? I know that context is everything, but maybe you can mention a few.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, first of all, data. Using data for me is a key measure. And not only, I think, definitely key for drafting and clearly defining what the problem is, but also when you propose solutions, especially important if you are proposing like increasing budget or creating a new budget or like talking about money, you need to be very clear about like how you substantiate that call for action, because it's like something really important. Right. And then the other thing, probably trying to be conscious about the circumstances of the government and the system you're working in, and trying to propose ideas that are acknowledge precisely like the circumstances of the government, and especially budget restrictions. I mean, of course, politicians may have the will to do whatever you are calling for, but at the end of the day, they have a limited budget and they do whatever is within those constraints. So I think you will be closer to getting a solution if you acknowledge that in the proposals you're doing, and that a way push you to think creatively. And an example comes to mind, for instance, that was like the college, in terms of making something for members to feel value. I think among different specialties in the medical profession in the UK, GPs have the sense that they feel less value than other professionals because of our registry.
Right.
They have a different registry. So we were calling for so many years for that change, just to be all integrated in the same registry instead of a differentiated. And the new government picked up that. That didn't imply money. It was just a status thing. Yep. And they pick up that and they announced it in our annual conference. They say, like, we are going to change this registry for you because we value you. It was a win for everyone. for him as a politician, for us, the college class, we've been pushing for that. And of course, the satisfaction for our membership in terms of what they can get out of our work.
Right. So tactics should always consider the feasibility, right? The feasibility of the action. There are some very crucial that can be very hard to achieve. Of course, you need to always push for those.
Of course, definitely,
long-term, right, perspective, but also have some, quick wins and winning situations. Very interesting. So thinking about this association, you mentioned 54,000 members. That's what you mentioned. Yeah, so super large. There are 54,000 personal interests there, right? I mean, it's and I'm sure that depending on geography, depending on age groups, depending on whatever categories, there might be different approaches to what they really want. How you manage to build coherent advocacy messages within that scope of work? That's very diverse.
Yeah, I would say like there's two tiers in this kind of analysis of like balancing interests, because there's definitely the diversity of membership that you just mentioned. And I think in that sense, the structure of the organization definitely helps to reflect those different needs and interests, because you not only have this big committee that represents like regionally local views, but also you have different interest groups. I work, for instance, with the Health Inequalities group, a data and digital group, but also you have groups representing different career stages. So trainees before becoming GPs, you have retired GPs on different stages so they can say what they need. So I think the structure has been well designed to try to capture those interests in a way of like moving forward wherever, like in a consensus and in a democratic way. So I think that's useful in the first year of complexity. But I would say the other main challenge in terms of balancing interest is what the member want, members want, and what the system needs and can afford and prioritize, let's say. So of course, for the good of everyone and for the good of the system, securing a happy and robust health workforce, will help the functioning of the system and ultimately contributing to the health of the population. And having patient at the center is definitely key. But sometimes these views kind of potentially clash because the government will see some measures more like as a priority for the patient rather than aligning to whatever the college is calling for. So, I mean, I think there were two main ways of trying to balancing those interests. One of them was like the college had actively decided to create a patient group for the college to advise policy decisions.
Like an advisory board.
Patients. But of patients, exactly. So this group meet regularly. We update them on which areas we were working on, and also they kind of provide feedback. And that was very valuable, and we tried to internalize those views as much as we could. At the same time, I will say the really enriching experience of being in the policy and public affairs team, like we were in a position where we had to advise, especially senior members and board of directors, let's say, on the best way of balancing these different interests. Because especially when were instances where you had this feeling that there were clashing interests, we had sometimes to advise, like maybe we should tone down this, or maybe we should redirect slightly the proposal, or maybe we should conciliate in a way these two sides, because the patient is always at the center, and we need to remind that even if we have a membership behind us and they pay our salaries, we need to be conscious that patients are the ultimate goal as well. So we were kind of that driving force, advising senior members of the organization to say, maybe we in this instance should say this instead of that. And that was really challenging, but interesting.
So I can see three main things here. First is a structure that is important. I'm thinking about federations. I'm thinking about large organizations that have different points of view or interests, and yeah, this is definitely key to have a structure that allows the members to feel that they are represented, not just in a on the paper, but actually that really works. So that's good. Second thing, and this is a very good practice actually. These types of advisory boards where you get insights from your main stakeholders. In this case, since it's very clear that the patients are the ultimate goal or beneficiary beyond the members, let's say. So it makes a lot of sense of having this type of advisory board. I guess that there is a lot of work done behind the scenes to make sure that the advisory board actually follows an agenda and the ways of gathering data, representativity, etc. I'm mentioning this because I think it's interesting for the for the audience. This is like the kitchen of the advocacy works. And then the last thing that is very interesting in what you're mentioning is how you would convey those messages to your senior leadership, right? Because it's not just about gathering information and insights, but about directing them and sharing actually something. Because I've seen this pitfall lots of times, the key messages just, okay, they're gathered, very good. You can say that you have an advisory board, but then what? I mean, are you really changing the way that you're working, or are you using those insights in a practical way towards senior leadership, representative communication, etc.? So very complete what you've just mentioned about the representativity. I think that here we have very good school case, about how to build this. I'm heading towards my last few questions. One of them is related to the ways that you do advocacy. Have you seen a change? Maybe this is a very traditional association, right? But maybe have you seen or heard about changes in the way that the association is doing advocacy compared to a decade ago, 2 decades ago, digitally, social networks, AI, etc.? Are you using these elements in your advocacy work, or how is it working?
So yeah, I would like to make a mix of my experience in the college and more broadly my experience in the area. Just thinking firstly on the college, I've seen, and I also was really close to the head of media in the college, and definitely was interesting to see how, just thinking purely on HR, the change in the structure has been in digital. So the head of digital came on her own. There was no media properly. There was like a press in positioning of the organization, but not properly media work. And then they hired this person as a head, and then she got an extra person, and then another one, and now the team is around 4 people. So I think you can see the need for having a presence in social media. And so I think a must and definite change is, broadly speaking, the digital space. You cannot leave that out of scope, definitely. And I would say not only just when we talk about social media, you have different platforms, but especially for advocacy, I would say you need to think about X, because a lot of political discussions are happening there, even if you don't like it. And also most of the decision makers are active on X. So I think it's really important to have presence in that particular platform. And depending on what you do, probably you need to be in other spaces as well. But also, again, thinking beyond the organization, I think alongside social media, I think a big change has been public participation in policy decisions. they have this has increased quite a lot. Social media has given voice to the common citizen, and now that's a new front that government, business organizations have to carefully manage. So I think civil activism offers opportunities in terms of advocacy, definitely, but it requires, like, on the one hand, a clear strategy of how to handle it or how to use that opportunity, and on the other hand, ideally to have certain level of literacy on the population, especially if we're talking about more like technical issues. So, for instance, if you work on a campaign and you want to have like a civil society support, then maybe you need to invest sometimes an effort in educating civil associations or community-based organizations and so on. So then they can become an ally for you, and then together can push for the same call to action. So I think, that's a different front to have in mind.
Right. So it's not just about, having a presence and having social networks because you need to, but rather integrating the digital element in your overall strategy. You mentioned it very well that you need to, work with your stakeholders to be sure that you have an aligned message. And this is part of the traditional engagement, but then using different platforms for different purposes, such as X for engaging with stakeholders, yes, but maybe the other platforms if you need to just build a PR strategy, communication, have a presence. All right, I fully agree with you that you cannot be out of the digital sphere now, but doing advocacy is something specific. And the way that you do advocacy also means that you're working on other stages. So it's a complex thing. Right. You mentioned earlier one key element that is to use evidence or data in your advocacy works. Can you mention a specific example on how you can use it, and why did it make a difference in terms of think about this scenario without data and the possible outcome of it?
Yeah, no, definitely. As I said, like, I think data is crucial, and I would like just to stress, because I think you mentioned before how important is context, and I've seen working in completely different, like environments, how data plays a different role in a way. Because I think when working in an environment with like strong institutionality and with a technocratic bureaucracy, using data becomes like a must do. Not, you don't have election. If you want to be seriously considered, you have to present proposals that have sound data behind it. Otherwise, you will lose credibility. Whereas in other contexts, I guess governments may cherry pick data, or just at the end of the day take decisions that are not data driven, which is like a different context. And sadly, the relevance of data is not as in other contexts. So I just wanted to stress that as a background context for this case. Yeah. And I can share an experience of a tricky situation where we were trying to get information, because of course I think budgeting is particularly sensitive, and when you're asking for, we want X amount of money for this particular thing, you need to be very careful of how you draft the number, because you will be asked for that. Mm-hmm. And of course, I mean, I was also leading in a bit of an infrastructure section of the work of the college. There was a need for improving and expand and update infrastructure for general practice, for primary care. And I mean, among of the many things we proposed, we were able to gather data about like the problem, clearly drafted, but we struggle quite a bit in terms of quantifying the number of how much money we needed for getting to the right position in terms of infrastructure. So in that case, we used the college used to run an annual survey to members, so we can capture the problems they're struggling with, and then we can campaign for those issues. And having like X number of members say that they are struggling with this and that. So that was definitely useful for campaigning, really, really useful. And we had a question in this survey about how much money you think you need to improve your infrastructure, and here numbers like from 50 to 100,000, from 100 to 150, and so on. And then to craft the number, we had no other source of information. We were researching here and there. There were no clear proposals from other bodies about this. So we decided to use kind of an average of the two main common answers, and kind of doing a math in there behind. But to be fair, we were really concerned about the soundness of the figure we used. So we decided at the end to kind of round up the number, saying around £2 billion, because before there was a clear number that a trade organization drafted with evidence a few years before, about 1 billion. But the need increased over the years, and we tried to be very careful because we had no really concise information behind, and we decided to put 2 billions. But internally, there was a lot of concern about using the numbers. So I seen like how not having the right numbers behind can just make you very dubious about your own work, even if you have the right goals. So I think that specific case helped me to realize like how important the use of data is.
Yes, I think that one should be also very transparent about methodology, about source of data, and at least have this transparent discussion. Of course, you would expect different levels of soundness of data depending on the stakeholder and associations such as the one you were working with. Of course, you would expect the highest level of soundness for specifically for large amounts of budget, right? So, another message here that I can draw from your answer is that you can also build your own data sets around primary information, primary data that you can gather. So I'm thinking about some patient organizations that they have access to patient data, and sometimes accuracy that not even ministries of health can have in emerging countries. So they become a very strong source of data, and what they lack sometimes is a methodology to put the data in a sound manner. So at the end of the day, you would be able to convey the message with a lot of seriousness, but also showing that you are in a special position to gather this data. So it's good that very large organizations also dig into their own sources to create data. This is super important in the context of advocacy. My two final questions are about some. First one is about challenges. You might think about other associations. I know that your experience is within this particular professional association, but maybe the lawyers association, or maybe other types of associations. Are there any common ground when thinking about advocacy and the challenges that they face when they try to influence public opinion as an association?
I think, first of all, I think in the first evident thing, particularly for this one, and one that it could be slightly more broadly, it's like, that can apply to other organizations of similar nature. The first thing, more particularly on health and on the college, is like one of the main challenges we used to face was the idea of like remaining decision makers about the linkage between the professional, the doctor, and end user, which is the patient, right? Because we were saying about this dichotomy about like, yeah, the end goal is to improve the health of the patient. And we, as a doctors, are the kind of the intermediary for that to happen. But it's so easy to forget about that when you are a decision maker. So the main challenge for the college was always finding a clear messaging and line to link one end to the other. So I think that was an interesting challenge we had to face quite commonly. But thinking more like in terms of other association, and I guess it may be even beyond only association, is the fact that, of course, you work in a space where there's so many issues happening, and the priorities of the government and decision makers be here today and there another day. So, and especially if you are proposing something technical, quite niche, you will find it difficult to position these technical issues either in the media or in high level decision makers, because they don't have the headspace or the technical knowledge to understand it. So I think in such cases, the challenge, and in a way, the key solution is to get attention to the messaging. I think that's key, because you need to carefully craft the message, translating core technical ideas into a more accessible way, and trying to highlight the relevance of those topics for everyone or for certain groups. So then you catch the attention of different target audiences.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess you can relate to the wording universes, or the language universes that different sectors use. When you've shifted sectors, you know that when you're in the mining sphere, you'll have a lot of engineering talk, and you'll have a lot of very specific land use topics, etc. And when you're in healthcare, of course, it's completely different, and so that specific language is hard to understand for people that are not part of it. So decision makers are not an exception of it, right? Sometimes they are not fully into the subject, even if they are the president of the commission of whatever health or whatever other issue. They might not be a doctor. They might be just someone that is part of the party that put the person there. So the construction of value messages, taking into consideration the fact that you need to go outside your very technical sphere of language, that is a very good approach. And of course, when you're fighting, and I'm thinking about specific subjects, when you're fighting or advocating about some specific things that are related to your work, you might think that everyone knows the importance of it, or why does it matter, but the majority of the time, people are not aware of it. They are not sensibilized. I mean, you need to create this awareness. So first of all, you need to say, why does it matter? And then you need to say how you can solve it, or what are you proposing to solve it? Because if you forget to mention why does it matter, sometimes you might very well explain what you're working on, but people are not going to put the priority that it needs. Okay, perfect. I'm going to go to my final question about other people that would like to work on this sphere, specifically talking about professional associations, which is today's subject. So what are the skills, the mindset, what would you recommend someone that is already working, in the advocacy sphere, but would like to go deeper into the professional colleges or whatever, this type of sector? What would be your recommendations for them?
I think three key things. One that may be applicable for not only professional bodies, but I will do more like dig in more particular how I think it works in here, but stakeholder management is really critical. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important to learn to cultivate your internal and external stakeholder. I was mentioning earlier, like how important it was for us to advise our senior members. So in the case of a professional body, one of your end clients is the membership. So you work for them, but you also have an internal structure and you have to work with them as well. So I think it's really important to understand the structure, the balances, and I think in a way being really diplomatic and learning how to navigate different interest and power and positions and how things work. I mean, it's the human nature in a way, but I think it's really important to navigate the context of understanding who is who and what role they play in the structure, but also be very careful in the way you connect with external stakeholders, because you are the face of a professional body when you interact outside, and you need to convene the message of the college carefully externally, but also cultivate those relationships because they will become probably key allies in the future for different things you will do, like such as the example I provided earlier about the think tank and the patient organization. So you can work in different ways with different stakeholders, something that we have done and we used to do in the college. So I think definitely stakeholder management, very important. A second point I will say, and it has to be with data, being very rigorous and clear in terms of the data you use and how you craft your messages linked to data, but more broadly about how you craft messages. And especially, I would say, in the calls to action. Because, yeah, of course, I've written in reports and you can do a wonderful research. But at the end of the day, the decision maker probably will just read the executive summary with the key calls to action. And you need to be very wise in the work and in the wording, in the selection of what you put there, because it may have a different impact on how you put the message and the call to action. So you need to think wisely about how and the words you choose for that. And finally, I would say being flexible. And that, again, I think in a way applies broadly for advocacy, because you have programmatic work you have to accomplish. But at the same time, especially for advocacy, we work in a very fast-paced environment. So a lot of things, political decisions and policies will change all the time. And you need to be prepared to do more reactive work and balance out your programmatic and your reactive work. So yeah, being flexible, I think, is a skill really, really useful in learning how to prioritize over, the duties and what you need to do now and what can wait for a bit. I think that definitely helps a lot.
Right. So I'm seeing some common ground there with other advocacy roles. So yeah, I'm more orientated to think that advocacy is, a set of skills that you can apply in a very versatile way to different sectors. Maybe for professional colleges, what you mentioned at the beginning about knowing the structure. Maybe when you're applying for a position, do your homework and understand very well who is who. But I think this also applies for any other position. In any case, it has been very, very insightful, Ines. Thank you very much for sharing this, a lot of information. And I'm sure that the audience will have a very rich viewing of the interview. Thank you very much for your time and hope to see you very soon.
Thanks again for the opportunity. Happy to share my experience. Take care.